On the night of December 30th, 2000, a crime took place in Tokyo that would become one of the most mysterious unsolved murder cases in Japanese history. More than 2 decades later, investigators still have the killer's DNA, fingerprints, blood, clothing fibers, and even personal belongings left behind at the crime scene. Yet despite all of this evidence, nobody knows who he is. Even more disturbing is what happened after the murders. Instead of fleeing, the killer remained inside the house for hours. He treated his injuries, ate food from the refrigerator, used the family's computer, rested on their couch, and moved around the home as if he belonged there. By sunrise, he vanished without a trace. To this day, no one has been able to explain who he was, why he chose this family, or how he escaped justice. The victims were the Miyazawa family. 44-year-old Mikio Miyazawa lived in a quiet neighborhood in Tokyo with his wife Yasuko, their 8-year-old daughter Nina, and their young son Rei. They were an ordinary family with ordinary lives. Their home stood near a park, surrounded by a peaceful community where violent crime was almost unheard of. As New Year's Eve approached, the city was filled with excitement. Streets glowed with holiday lights, stores were crowded with shoppers, and families across Tokyo prepared for one of the most important celebrations of the year. December 30th seemed completely normal. The Miyazawas spent the day together shopping, preparing for the holiday, and making plans for the future. They laughed, shared meals, and enjoyed what would unknowingly become their final day together. There was no sign that anyone was watching them, no warning that danger was approaching, nothing to suggest that before the night was over, their lives would come to a horrifying end. Late that evening, the neighborhood grew quiet. One by one, lights turned off inside nearby homes. Families settled into bed. The streets emptied. Around 11:30 p.m., while the Miyazawas slept, a dark figure emerged from the nearby park. Hidden by trees and darkness, the person moved silently toward the family's home. He appeared confident and purposeful. Investigators would later conclude that this was not someone acting impulsively. He seemed to know exactly where he was going. The front door was locked, but the intruder found another way inside. He climbed a tree next to the house and reached a second-floor bathroom window. Within moments, he was inside. No alarms sounded. No neighbors noticed. The house remained silent. What happened next remains one of the most terrifying aspects of the entire case. Investigators believe the killer first entered the room where young Rei was sleeping. The boy became the first victim. The attack likely created noise, enough to wake Mikio. Realizing something was wrong, he rushed toward the disturbance. Suddenly, he found himself face to face with an armed intruder inside his own home. A violent struggle followed. Mikio fought desperately to protect his family. Evidence later showed that he managed to injure the attacker during the confrontation. The killer bled inside the house, leaving behind one of the most important pieces of evidence investigators would ever recover. But despite his efforts, Mikio was overpowered. The attacker used a Santoku kitchen knife during the assault. The attack was so brutal that the blade eventually broke. A fragment of the knife became lodged inside Mikio's skull. Yet even after killing him, the attacker continued his assault with shocking levels of violence. It was as if rage alone was driving him forward. When the struggle ended, Mikio's body lay near the staircase. The killer then moved deeper into the house. Armed with another knife taken from the kitchen, he went after Yasuko and Nina. What happened to them was even more horrifying. Investigators later concluded that the attacks against the mother and daughter lasted longer and involved significantly more violence. The level of brutality suggested a deeply personal rage, though nobody has ever been able to explain why. Within a short period of time, the entire family was dead. At this point, most killers would have fled immediately. But this killer did something no one expected. He stayed. After the murders, he walked outside and disconnected the home's telephone line. It appeared to be a calculated step, perhaps to ensure that no surviving victim could call for help. Yet after doing so, he returned inside and began behaving in ways that continue to puzzle investigators even today. Instead of escaping, he started treating his own wounds. He used medical supplies from the house and left the bloody bandages behind. He made no effort to clean up after himself. In fact, it almost seemed as if he wanted police to find everything exactly as he had left it. Then he went into the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator. He helped himself to food. Investigators later discovered that he ate melon and ice cream belonging to the family. He prepared tea and relaxed inside the home. Imagine the scene. Only a short distance away were the bodies of 4 murdered people. Yet the killer behaved as though he were an invited guest spending the evening in someone else's house. Hours passed. At some point, he used the family's computer. Digital evidence later showed activity on the machine after the murders had occurred. Nobody knows exactly what he was looking for. He may have been searching for information. He may have been curious. Or perhaps he simply wanted to pass the time. The mystery only deepened. No signs of life. Using her key, she entered the house. What she discovered would haunt her forever. Near the staircase, she found Mikio's body. Terrified, she called out for her daughter and grandchildren. There was only silence. As she moved through the house, the nightmare unfolded before her eyes. Yasuko and Nina were found upstairs. Then she discovered young Ray in his bedroom. An entire family had been wiped out. Police quickly flooded the scene. At first, investigators believed the case would be solved rapidly. After all, the killer had left behind an extraordinary amount of evidence. There were fingerprints throughout the house, blood from both the victims and the attacker, personal items, clothing fibers, footprints, DNA. It seemed impossible that someone could leave so much behind and not be identified. But that confidence soon disappeared. The DNA did not match anyone either. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. The mystery only deepened. Investigators analyzed everything they could find. They studied the killer's clothing. They examined fibers. They tested blood samples. They reconstructed his movements through the house minute by minute. One of the most unusual clues came from a small bag left behind by the attacker. At first, the discovery seemed insignificant, but laboratory testing produced a shocking result. The sand appeared to originate from the area surrounding Edwards Air Force Base in the United States. This revelation triggered a wave of speculation. Could the killer have military connections? Could he have traveled internationally? Could he be linked to foreign military personnel stationed in Japan? No theory could be proven. Further analysis suggested the attacker may have been of mixed ancestry, possibly with roots connected to Southern Europe. His blood type was identified as type A. Based on the physical evidence, investigators estimated that he was likely between 15 and 35 years old, approximately 170 centimeters tall, and physically fit. Yet even with this profile, no suspect could be conclusively identified. The case became one of the largest investigations in Japanese history. Some believed the killer knew Yasuko personally. Others argued that he may have been obsessed with one of the family members. A few psychologists suggested that the excessive violence directed toward Yasuko and Nina indicated deep-seated anger toward women. Another theory focused on local conflicts. Reports suggested that Mikio had argued with groups of young people in the neighborhood prior to the murders. Could revenge have escalated into unimaginable violence? Others proposed that the killer was simply a drifter who randomly selected the house after passing through the nearby park. Every theory seemed possible. None could be proven. Years passed, then decades. The victims' relatives continued searching for answers. Investigators continued reviewing evidence. Technology improved. DNA analysis advanced. Yet the identity of the killer remained hidden. Today, the Miyazawa family murder case remains officially unsolved. Somewhere, the person responsible may still be alive. He may have built a normal life. He may walk through crowded streets unnoticed. And that is what makes this story so disturbing. This was not a perfect crime. The killer made mistakes. He left blood, personal belongings. He spent hours inside the crime scene. He practically introduced himself to investigators. And yet, more than 20 years later, one question remains unanswered. Who was the man who spent the night in a house full of victims and then disappeared into history?